Welcome to this tutorial where we create top-down 2D movement for all of your different top-down 2D movement type games. Okay, so to start off making top-down 2D movement, we're just going to go to an blank empty Unity screen like this. What we're going to first want to do is we're going to create a 2D object, a sprite, and then a square. We can name the square player, and this will just be our player for this top-down movement tutorial. And we're going to add a few components to this. We're going to add a box collider 2D to it, and then if we turn off the sprite render, we can see this little green line around it, and that's the collider in the box collider. If we turn the sprite render back on, we'll see that we have the player sprites back there. And then we're also going to want to add a rigid body 2D component to this player that we have right here. Inside of this rigid body 2D, there's lots of different components. But what we're going to do is we're going to want to change the gravity scale to 0, and we're going to want to freeze rotation on the z-axis so that the player does not spin around in circles whenever he collides with something or gets hit with something if you're making a top-down RPG. So what we're going to want to do is go into our project folders, and we're going to create a new C# script, and we are going to name this player movement. This script is going to have all of our top-down movement in it so that we are able to have the player move in a top-down way. So what we're going to do is open up this script inside of Visual Studio or your code editor of choice. When we get into our code editor, we're going to delete the start method because we don't need it, and then we're going to add a few variables. We're going to add a public rigid body 2D, and this is going to be a reference to our rigid body 2D. We can name this rigid body 2D. Then we are going to also have a public float, and we're going to name this speed, and this will be the speed of our player when he's walking around in our world. And for right now, we can set this to 10 just as a base point, and then inside of the update function, we are going to add two more float variables, and the first one's going to be called X movement, and then we can add another one named Y movement, and X movement will be equal to input.getAxisRaw, and then it will look for a string reference, and then inside of these parentheses we can type horizontal, and then this is going to be the x-axis, the movement that we have, and the y movement will be the same exact thing but for vertical. So input.getAxisRaw, and then a string reference, and this is going to be vertical. And then what we're going to do is we're going to want to create a new vector2, and we'll name this player movement, and then we'll set this equal to a new vector2, and then inside of this vector2 it will have X movement and Y movement as the parameters for it. And then what we'll do at the back is we will add dot normalize to it, so that when we move our player in the diagonal directions, he doesn't move twice as fast. If we didn't add this, then when we moved in the diagonal directions, the player would move twice as fast as it would have before. And what we're going to have to do here to get this error is we're going to have to delete this new at the back, and then it will get rid of this error right here. So what we can do is we can get the reference to our rigid body 2D. We can do dot velocity, and we're going to set this equal to player movement. That's the vector2 that we added for our X movement and Y movement, and we're going to multiply this by our speed so that he moves at the speed that you would like to. So we're going to go back into our Unity editor, and once it compiles, we're going to add this script onto our player, and then we'll be able to move our player around in our little world that we have right here. Once our Unity editor compiles, we can go to our player game object right here with our box collider and rigid body 2D on it, and then at the bottom we can drag in our player movement script and we can add it right here. It's going to look for a rigid body 2D reference, We can just add that right here. And then we can keep the speed as 10 right now. And then what we can also do is we can add a 2D object, a sprite, and a square. We can name this boundary. We can move this up to the top and then make it very long so it just gets up to the top. We can add a box collider to this, a box collider 2D to this actually. We can change the color to something like red. Then maybe we can duplicate this and then put it down at the bottom. And then if we duplicate this again and we move it to the side and then we change how big it is and then how tall it is, we can move this to the side. And if we duplicate it again, we can move this to the side. And you see that right now we have all of these boundaries so that our player cannot move outside the boundaries of the camera. And then if we just click play, we'll be able to see that our player will be able to move around in this world, but he won't be able to move out of these boundaries because we added box colliders to them. Once we get into play mode, we can see that we have our player. And then if we use the arrow keys or the W, S, and A and D keys, we can move our player in 8 different directions with this top-down movement. And then you see that he collides with these boundaries, but he can't move or past them. And then you can see that if we move in diagonal directions, we do not move twice as fast because we added that normalized at the end of the vector 2 that we created. Thank you for following along through this tutorial where we created a top-down movement for the top-down 2D games. If you like this tutorial, please give our channel a like and a subscribe because it really helps out our channel. Thank you.